the English language presentation on why English is the way it is now and why its position in the world should be changed. The two questions I'll be answering today is why should English not be in the position it is now, and what makes English a bad language. So a quick introduction to Germanic languages is that English is a West Germanic language like German, Dutch, Afrikaans, Frisian, and other languages. English was originally started off as a full Germanic language, but now after a lot of influence from Romance languages like French and Spanish, it's not necessarily like 100% Germanic, although a language can be 100% a specific language family. And Germanic languages consist of North, West, and now extinct East Germanic languages. So as you go further back, Old English was a lot closer to German than it is like right now. Like modern English is very different from German compared to back then when how different Old English is from German. So the question I'll be answering first is why should the English language's position in the British Isles and the world change? And as you look over here at 400 CE, you can see that only Celtic languages were spoken there. But then you go to 600 CE, you start seeing Germanic language over here. And at 800 you see a bit more, and at 1000 CE you see more, and so on, until you get to the 2000s where it's mostly just Germanic languages spoken in the Brittonic Isles. Now, what exactly are Celtic languages, you might ask? Well, Celtic language is a family group, much like Germanic language. And originally, Celtic languages were spoken throughout mainland Europe, like Lepontic was spoken in modern-day Italy, and how Gaulish was spoken throughout modern-day France. And so, the Celtics originally inhabited a lot of places like France, Spain, Italy, the western Germanic states of Europe, the eastern states of Europe, the Turkish area. They just inhabited most places, as you can see here. And so Celtic languages were originally vastly spoken throughout Europe, but a lot of stress and first was pressed onto the Celts, like how the Romans defeated the Romans, the Huns, the Slavs. They defeated the Celts and they pushed them back, and this was called as the migration period, where they migrated further into the west side of Europe. And then 600 AD, Germanic tribes started harassing and attacking these Celtic states and provinces and tribes over here, right over here. And then so they had to move again over here in the UK. And believe it or not, Anglo-Saxons started attacking them now. So they never really had a peace of silence and rest and peace. This is a map of modern-day UK and this little piece of France right here. And what this is supposed to show you is what the Celtic languages are spoken to this day. As you can see, with the Gaelic languages, we have the Isle of Manx over here, where they spoke Manx Gaelic. And then we have Scotland up here, where they obviously spoke Scottish. Ireland over here, where they obviously spoke Irish. And then we got over here, which is the other type of Gaelic language, the other type of Celtic languages, which are Gaelic. And you got Welsh that's spoken in Wales. You got Cornish that's spoken in Cornwall, and you got the Brittonic language spoken in Breton. And so a quick little history type thing is that in 1616, Irish was banned and further repressed after the Jacobite Rebellion in 1745, and so they couldn't really exactly speak Irish anymore in Ireland. And in 1536, Henry VIII decided to pass the Act of Union, prohibiting the use of Welsh in public administrations and the legal system. And so that also made all the opportunities and the usefulness of Welsh severely go down, and it was not really a needed language anymore. And you also have Scottish Gaelic, which was banned in 1616 by King James I, and so he banned it to bring the Highlanders of Scotland under the crown's rule and to remove the quote-unquote barbaric culture in nature. And we also have Manx Gaelic. It was not banned, but more like the stress that was inflicted upon it by the English language, and because it's a really small little island and island right here, so it didn't really have many native speakers and anything like that. And so usually about the 8th, and so it just kind of died out of use. And then during the 18th century or 1700s, Cornish was also banned by the crown to be used in public, and all the Celtic languages besides two were basically banned. And the last language would be the Brittonic language, which is spoken in France. This part right here, and so, but it died out not because it was banned, because the French government has no reason to ban the Brittonic language, but like the English crown, which wanted to unify everybody and to get rid of the barbaric natures and cultures and languages and make them all Germanic. And so French just vastly overtook the usefulness of Brittonic language, and so now it's practically a dead language. So why should English's positions be changed? Like, all I've given you was a history, not really anything to back up my claim. And while the constant pressure that the Celtic languages have experienced throughout the many years were cruel to their culture, they didn't deserve that. They've always been pushed, shoved, and attacked for no reason, just for land and everything like that. And so the Celts didn't really have this one place to call home. And although the governments right now are trying to bring back the language from the dead, like in Ireland, they teach schools in Irish. They have different lines that are spoken in Irish, and the same thing with Wales. They have schools that are now being taught in Welsh, and in their schools also teach that Celtic language is trying to overall incorporate the language into everyday use. But in my opinion, I don't think the Celtic languages deserve just to be brought back, because they'll probably just end up being pushed back again like they originally were, or they'll push people just lose interest in it. What they should do is they should embrace the languages that are supported and supported to achieve a new importance for those languages. And so like Irish, the main official language could be Irish and not English like it is in the UK. And then the same thing with Wales. They could speak Welsh as a native language and everything like that. And of course, English could still be spoken in England. I'm not saying anything that English doesn't belong in the world anymore, but I mean, English could still be used as a lingua franca for all around the UK and to connect all those different Celtic-speaking nations. And also, the majority of Celtic languages were extinct at some point too, and just bringing them back isn't like the best long-term solution. They'll just be like people just lose interest again. Like the last speaker of Manx, who spoke Manx as a first language, died in 1970 something, I believe. And it's just kind of sad seeing languages and important histories with rich cultures and all that stuff just die and people not really care much. Now, you could now wait a minute. You could always say, if those are your only reasons, the same thing could be said about indigenous languages of the Americas, Africa, Oceania, Asia, anywhere else. And well, in this specific scenario, English isn't exactly the most efficient language, and it breaks a lot of its own rules, and it's a very complicated language, and it's difficult too. And so what I'm proposing is they should stop speaking English as the main language, so use it as a lingua franca, yes, and as a great political language to do diplomacy in and all that stuff, but they should try to bring back the like cultural languages, and instead of just speaking English as every day. And in this case, also some other indigenous languages don't have full databases on the structure and grammar, vocabulary, and all the important stuff like native speakers. Not every language, indigenous language of the Americas or Asia or Africa have native speakers. Like some native indigenous African languages have like what 12 native speakers of that language, because now the presence has severely gone down. Geographically, the languages are kind of useless. Now, I'm not saying that the language has no meaning, it's not important, but geographically it's useless. There's no political gain you can get from that. But bringing that back to Celtic languages, those, like the geographical area of the UK is really good, and bringing back those Celtic languages will also help understand more about human culture. And also, Celtic languages aren't even kind of hard. They have a lot of mutations in them, but also they have a similar grammar structure with English. How they say "do" in front of words like "do you want to go swimming" instead of saying "swim you go." Like instead of putting the verb first to indicate a question instead of an action. And I also believe that other indigenous languages like Tarahumara, Yucatec, Nahuatl should be spoken a lot more in Mexico, and the same thing about other languages like Guarani should be spoken more in the South America, even though it is, and Quiche should also be spoken a lot more. Those indigenous languages were there for a reason, because that's the people who originally spoke them, and those languages aren't exactly the hardest to learn either, so it wouldn't be it would be a drastic change because you're changing the entire native language and structure of one country, but at the same time you'd be bringing back a lot more than you'd be giving up. So in other words, we are an advancing society. We can't rely on languages that are difficult or almost impossible to communicate with, like some African or some indigenous African languages. But also, English sometimes seems to be a bit too inefficient due to all of its mutations, I want to say, and its influence that it has upon some other languages. And so this is basically a quick map of what I showed you back then, where you can see all the different types of language families spoken throughout the world here. Like we got here, what is this? This is like erotic language right here. And you got Proto-Indo-European here, and this is the whole thing right here. So this is a fun map to use. And so, time to answer the next question. What makes English a non-efficient language, you might ask? Well, let's first start off with a quick lesson on proto-languages to better understand this. Okay, well, first you can see Proto-Germanic, North Germanic, West Germanic, East Germanic, that stuff. So, well, proto-languages are languages that were the base or the first language of that branch that evolved into the many other languages in the branch that we know today. An example of this would be Proto-Indo-European, which is also known as PIE. And Proto-Indo-European was the first Proto-Indo-European language spoken. And what it ended up doing was split off into different sections like Proto-Balto-Slavic, Proto-Germanic, Proto-Romance, Proto-Umbo-Italic, Proto-Celtic, etc. And then what those do is, and to follow this English example, we'll do Proto-Germanic. So it goes from PIE to Proto-Germanic, and then which Proto-Germanic split into North Germanic, West, and then East Germanic, and then following up with English for West Germanic. Well, English derived from a middle ancestor, like I think German or something like that. But a better way to think about this is that Proto-Indo-European could be the great-grandparent, and then Proto-Germanic could be the grandparent, and then the West Germanic language could be the parent, and then the baby could be that version of German that changed into what we now know as Old English, which would be the baby turning into a toddler, and then that version of Old English turning into Middle English, turning into a child, in other words, and then that child turning into a now grown adult as Modern English, still having a lot more evolution to go for it. And that's basically what the languages are. The languages that, are like the base first language of that branch. Now, what do proto-languages have to do with English, you might ask? Because I'm not exactly explaining why English is such a hard language to learn and why it's practically useless, just because it has proto-language. Every language has a proto-language. So, Old English, which is basically an older ancestor of the modern English that we know today. It was a completely different, Old English was a completely different language than modern English. Like, as a modern English speaker now, I would not be able to understand this, like, I won't be able to understand half of what the Old English is, because it just changed a lot during the Norman conquest. And so practically, they're different languages. They're different as night and day. But night and day also have a lot of similarities, which is why I chose that reference, because Old English and modern English have like vast similarities, but they also are very different. And so basically, the main points I'll be covering for this question are the alphabet, its cases, its phonetic spelling, and, well, its spelling. It's basically that. And so, this is a quick little question here. Like, why is Old English far superior than English? What makes English a disgraceful language? Those are two questions that we can use to help answer our original question. Now, to start off with my first point, we can use sounds and alphabets, or random symbols. Old English originally used its runes, which is what you see now. So basically, those weird jagged lines that are used to symbolize what Vikings used to write, basically. And then when Old English then switched into the Latin alphabet, also known as the Roman alphabet, whatever you want to call it, which is what English uses now, the Latin alphabet. And so they originally had 32 letters. In using the Latin alphabet, they originally had 32 letters. They had the letter F included, the letter Thurn, the Win, and then the Ash, I forgot the other one, the Ethon or something like that. They also had the and symbol and a lot of others. And now we only have 26 letters. Now, modern English must split 34 different sounds within 26 different letters, without a single accent, tone, or any other symbol to indicate stress on a letter. And now Old English, on the other hand, has around 56 different letters. And those 56 different sounds had to be split into 32 different letters. Now, that's basically the exact same thing as English, but in this case, Old English had stress marks and accents and everything like that to indicate stress. Also, they had other letters too, so it kind of brought down the load a lot less than what we know and have today. Now, cases. None of you probably know what cases are, and cases is like, it indicates what something is. So it could indicate what something is a subject, if something is a direct object, and everything like that. In English, we practically have none, and we don't really use them that much. And in German, they use the case on the article for the word duck in terms of der, den, den, die, etc. And in Latin, they have the cases on the end of the verb, on the end of the noun. And so basically, cases, in my opinion, are an important factor of a language. Of course, they're not needed. You can just use word order and say subject, verb, object, and it'll be simple like that. They'll understand what you mean. But it just seems to make the language a lot more efficient, a lot more sophisticated, advanced, and all that stuff, to have cases in them. And so modern English only has the cases, unlike Old English, which has about 5 cases. Modern English uses the nominative case, the accusative case, and the genitive case. The nominative case indicates when something's a subject, the accusative case indicates when something's the object, and the genitive case indicates when something's the possessive. Like you would put Ganiris, you put the S after the name to indicate that's possession. And then accusative could be he to him, because now him is the object. Wait, like, are you going to give it to him? The object is him. The direct object is him. And then the subject will be, well, you, what you originally see in a dictionary. You'd see you, you'd see him, and he, and that stuff. Now, Old English, on the other hand, has 5, like I stated. They have the nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, and the instrumental cases. The nominative case is subject, like I explained. The genitive is indicates possession. The accusative indicates when something's the indirect, the object. Now, dative is the direct object. Like you would say, you gave the ball, being the indirect, dative is the indirect object. you'd give someone the ball. The ball is the indirect object. Now the instrumental is maybe a bit extra if you ask me, but the instrumental case indicates what's being used to carry out the action. Like you would say, I gave John a ball with a shovel. So you basically put the ball on the shovel, and so the shovel could be used as an instrumental case, and you have to put the instrumental case on either the article or the verb, depending on how Old English decided to do it back then. And so a sample with all of them would be like the subject could be me, the indirect object could be the ball, the direct object could be the heel, and then the instrumental case could be a shovel. The genitive case could be possession, obviously. And so a quick example would be Ganiri's ball. When Ganiri handed his ball to the heel with a shovel. That would indicate most of them. But you can see you don't really hear any cases in English because we don't have those cases. We use subject, verb, object to indicate what is the subject, what's the object, etc. Now, phonetics, spelling, and a bone to pick. I have a bone to pick with English because modern English is an interesting language, to say the least. In English, its consonants and its vowels can make different sounds, and some are silent, so like the E and I's, you don't pronounce the E. And then to add to that, they don't even have a single written symbol to indicate stress. I mean, sure, when you have a silent E at the end, it influences how the sound of the letters are pronounced in the middle, but I mean, you're using a letter to indicate stress. Like, I understand diphthongs and all that stuff, but not using a letter at the end of the word to indicate stress on something inside. It doesn't really make much sense. I mean, it does, but it's inefficient. Just use an accent, use a rising accent to indicate it. Now, Old English is different in this scenario. Old English is a lot more phonetic than modern English is, therefore it would be a lot simpler to read, write, and speak in it. Modern English spelling is also interesting, because when it comes to spelling, English makes no sense. With its silent letters and its confusing mutations. Like, originally, the C in Latin made the K sound, made the K sound, but now the C can make both the K and S sound. And if you still look at Latin, it still makes the K sound. Or if you go to Spanish, the C really, like, they have actual rules, like the C makes the K when it's in front of the A, when it's in front of the O, but not when it's in front of the I or E or something like that. And so English, it's just like, it's a mess, kind of. Like, sure, you have rules on when the C is pronounced like an S and when the A makes a different tone, etc. But English often has a reputation to make its own rules and write, and that's why English learners have a lot of a hard time learning and mimicking our accent when we speak English, like I do. Like, people say though, rough, tough, through, etc. Like, they all end the same but have different pronunciations. It doesn't really make much sense. And modern English spelling is an interesting language when it comes to spelling. Like, it makes no sense, and it's just easier with a phonetic spelling like Spanish or German. And, well, having letter combinations making different sounds is just and as long as you follow that rule, it's okay. But English seems to be breaking and not be very up to date with its languages and stuff like that. Here's a quick little sample text so you can just quickly understand what I mean. So in modern English, this would be: all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. And that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the first article, I believe. Now in Old English, this would be: folk veordaf freo and efne beare and Richtum geboren gerad and ingehiged sind heom gefethu and hiethuifon to othrum on feore brothorshipes don. And I'm sorry, but I completely butchered that because I don't speak Old English. I just know how to pronounce some of the letters, most of them actually. And as you can see, you see this dot on top of the G, and it indicates stress. I don't know what stress it indicates, but it does. We have the macron over here, which makes it a long vowel. And then you have also another one. I think also you have rising accents. I don't see any though. I don't know though. And I think this makes a ch sound. Or the SC with that makes a sh sound. I don't know. But in this case, it's just a lot. Like you could just read this easily. Like you don't say beings. You don't say ave or fe or equal or wickets or endowed or versen or conscience or shall or honor another, something like that. You don't really say it like that. You actually pronounce. English speakers know how to pronounce words because we've been taught, like we've been studying this for a long time, and so we native speakers don't have a problem speaking the language. Well, I don't have trouble pronouncing words sometimes, but in my defense, English is not my first language. But in this case, it's just simpler because in modern and Old English, it's all very like it's phonetic. You just read it like it's spelled, unlike in English where that's equal, not equal, and that's beings, not beings, etc. And so basically that's the end of this presentation. Of course, it's a quick family tree of Indo-European. As you can see, Indo-Iranian is Indo-European, which splits into these European languages, Indo-Iranian with Hindi and all those languages. And in this one, you have Spanish, Russian, German, English, etc. And if you're interested in knowing what those Celtic languages sound like that I mentioned before, there are a few extra slides at the end where you can download the PDF of the PowerPoint, and you can watch and hear the 2 songs I put in each different language on each different slide. There's also a sample text of what it looks like written down, and you can try to read it, and it will just melt. And I hope this will also help you bring to my class. It's a bit harder to do presentations recorded than just going up and teaching them in front of classes, but this is the end. Thank you for listening.